film or series lit your fuse as a young man and made you have to tell stories on screen?
Well, I have prepared for this question. No, for me, it was E.T., Spielberg's E.T. I was 10 years old when that movie, I was lucky to be 10 years old when that movie came out. And I remember my uncle, I'm from Norway, and I'm from a small town like 2 hours south of Norway. And I remember him driving me to the cinema in Oslo because it would take another months or something like that before it would come to our cinema. And I was so obsessed with this film, and before I saw it, I was everything, back then obviously there was no internet or anything, so it was like the local newspaper basically. And obviously, the movie probably came a year later to Norway from when it opened in the States. So there was already a phenomenon around it, and he brought me to this big cinema in Oslo called the Colosseum, which is, I think it's like 1,000 seats, and I was sitting in there. I was 10 years old, and the movie starts, and I'm completely submerged in this story, and I think for the rest of my life and my career, I will always be looking for the elements of what that film gave me. It has the drama, it makes you cry, it scares you, it makes you laugh, and besides being a perfect example of filmmaking in my eyes. So I think like that magic of what that movie gave me, is what I will always be looking for when I make my own humble, tries of films. But I think, yeah. So that was a big moment, and I decided then basically that I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was 10 years old.
You've spent so much time making movies on the water between Kon-Tiki and Pirates of the Caribbean and Young Woman in the Sea. I would have thought if you were going to choose a Spielberg film, you probably would have said Jaws.
Well, Jaws has kind of like become my favorite film, when I got a little older. I'm obviously a huge Spielberg fan. And I always watch Jaws before making anything. So yes, I think, I grew up by the ocean, so for me, I always long for the ocean when I'm not there. So I think for me, the stories that attracts me somehow is infused by that kind of sense of nature and elements surrounding you.
Yeah, and then with both E.T. and Jaws, it's the uncanny knack of being able to create humanity and relatable characters within. I watch Jaws, 3 times a year, and it isn't to see the shark. That wears off a little bit, but just the story of the Indianapolis and, and just there's so many moments in there. The banter between the 3 guys is just unforgettable. So now when you were on your way up, making your way as a filmmaker, what movie or series did you watch that was so good it made you think, what am I doing here? Can I ever rise to that level? Should I be playing in this sandbox?
Well, that happens all the time. So, every time I see a good movie, I'm like, oh my God. And I think for every movie I make, it humbles me more and more. And I work harder and harder to try to rise to every occasion. It's hard for me to pinpoint one movie. There's always like good movies. But I did grow up in the 80s, so obviously, like, I am a child of the 80s in that sense, and when you start out making films, you think you can make it better, you think you can make everything better, and when you're a teenager and in your 20s and 30s, you kind of like, you just, have this I guess ignorance is bliss, you know, and then you start realizing like what it takes and how hard it is, and then I'm happy I discovered that, you know, so that you always keep thriving, you always keep working harder, you can always make it better, you can, you know. So I use all films that I see around me for inspiration, you know, as a big kick in the butt, you know. And I love when I see a good movie, because we need that, you know, we need the good movies. And we don't all have to like the, you know, the same films. It's not about that either. I like, you know, watching a good movie in the theater, and I think that is my art form, to make movies for the cinema. It's a social experience. We have to keep just making them, you know.
Yeah, I love the sentiment. So now, you know, maybe it was a success of your own work or approval from someone whose opinion really mattered to you. What first gave you the confidence that, in fact, you could do this and you did belong?
You know, I had done my first Norwegian film. It was called Max Manus, and it was like a World War II film. And I remember one day getting a letter in the mail, you know, that was back then, and it was from Bruce Beresford, the director of many movies and Oscar winning and Driving Miss Daisy. And he had this lovely letter where he wrote how much he loved my Norwegian film. And I thought that was so grand of him. I never met him after that or was able to thank him, but that was like a big moment for me, you know, being in my little town in Norway and getting a letter from a big, you know, world famous, amazing director like him. And then obviously when Kon-Tiki got the Golden Globe nominations and the Academy Award nominations and all of that, that was, you know, that was also pretty good.
Well, now, what would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to allow you to turn these projects that influenced you into your own language as a filmmaker?
The obstacles are always, you know, when you want to be a filmmaker, you have to make films to be a filmmaker. You know, I was lucky to have, you know, a camera, and I persuaded a local, you know, little infomercial company to be able to sit there and edit at night for free, back when in the 80s the equipment was very expensive, you know. And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and I, you know, and been doing it ever since. And I think I can't really say anything else that's been my obstacle, because I feel so lucky in my life. Of course, I'm from a small country, and, you know, English is not my first language and all of that. I never had any network, you know, growing up and all of that. But that's just something you have to, you know, work on and keep doing it and keep making films and. You know, so I just, the biggest obstacle for me is just like trying to be a good director, you know, and every day on set or in pre-production or in post-production, like every day trying to be the best I can be in some way and tell a good story, you know, and that's the obstacle.
You know, Daisy Ridley was coming off Star Wars, and you were coming off the Pirates film and numerous other successes. What made you put all your chips on the table to tell this story about this woman, the first to swim the English Channel? Why did you invest so much into that?
It's the best script I've ever read. It was a story that had everything I was looking for. I have two teenage daughters. that I wanted to make a movie for, an inspiring story for them. I think it's important that we know our history and where we are coming from. And I was baffled that I didn't know the story. And when I talked to people about it, nobody seemed to really know this story that was such a world event when it happened 100 years ago and changed, you know, women's sports forever, most likely. And I think that's important, you know, that's important to tell. And it had all of those elements, you know, the underdog story, the symbolism, the ocean, you know, of Trudy, you know, of Daisy Ridley fighting against the tide of the times. And so for me, it's such a no-brainer that this was something that I was immediately passionate about it, and took many, many years to be where we are today, you know, with the movie going up in the theater. So this was not an easy movie to be made in the Hollywood studio system in these days, unfortunately. But everybody involved, you know, Jerry Bruckheimer and Disney and Daisy Ridley, we were fighting so hard. This was a true passion project for all of us. So it was, I never been a part of a movie like that before, where we're such a unified, you know, gang of filmmakers trying to make this happen.
What were the obstacles facing Trudy? Now, I'd read that she, you know, she sold her story to create the financing so that she would be able to do this. You know, a few guys had made the swim, but what part of her struggle grabbed you?
Well, I think it's the ultimate underdog story. You know, like, she's an underdog, not by her. She's, you know, we don't choose to be an underdog, obviously, but it was a world run by men, and I think it resonates also a little bit of today, obviously. But back then it was brutal. You know, the Olympic Committee, they didn't believe women, you know, should be in sports. They thought it was physically harmful, or they used that excuse at least to suppress. So they were, I think, honestly, men back then, and I, in certain degree today as well, were nervous that she was gonna do it, that she was gonna make it, honestly, and they would lose power. So for me, when she decided to do this, imagine, she was willing to risk her own life for what she believed in. And that's a story worth telling, you know. And that was the key to the movie for me, was to understand why. Why are you willing to die for this? I think for her there was no alternative. You know, she had to do this to live and to be respected as a woman, as a human being. So she set out to do the most difficult thing, and as you say, many men had died before her. Only 2 or 3 had made it over, and it was so unthinkable at the time, and it's mind blowing that she actually went through with it.